My name is Ray Gorsi. I'm proud to be one of the authors of the book Ending Parkinson's Disease. And today we have a special three-part session. The first is going to highlight an interview that I had the pleasure and privilege of speaking with Brian Grant earlier this week. We're going to show that for the next 25 minutes or so. And then I'm going to be joined by the executive director of the Brian Grant Foundation, Ms. Katrina, who's with us right now. And then third, we're going to take questions from you on anything to do with the Brian Grant Foundation, their work, and big focus on nutrition and exercise, as well as any other questions that you might have about Brian Grant and his story and the activities that are ongoing at the foundation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby and show you this great, outstanding interview with Brian Grant. For 12 years, Brian Grant was an NBA star basketball player. Tim Duncan, one of his contemporaries and an all-time great, called him, quote, the hardest working guy in the league. In his outstanding work on the court, Brian was a leader in the community. He cared for and raised money for terminally ill children, worked with Mothers Against Gang Violence, and provided free basketball clinics across the country. In 1999, the NBA recognized Brian Grant for his service with the Walter J. Kennedy Citizenship Award. However, Brian Grant's journey was just beginning. In 2008, just 2 years after retiring from the NBA, Brian Grant was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Like many with the world's fastest growing brain disease, Brian initially suffered with the disease in silence. In 2009, he ended that silence, and in 2010 formed the Brian Grant Foundation. The foundation provides proven tools to improve the well-being of people with Parkinson's. Among its tools are excellent programs in nutrition and exercise. We are delighted and honored, and I can't contain my enthusiasm, to welcome Brian Grant to our Voices of Parkinson's series. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
So Brian, you grew up in a small town, Georgetown, Ohio, outside of Cincinnati. It turns out that you and I were born one day apart and 40 miles from one another. And it turns out that Shaquille O'Neal was born the day after you.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in a small town in Southern Ohio?
I tell you what, it was a blessing, and I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of good people there, and there were a lot of moments that I really enjoyed, like cutting tobacco, baling hay, doing farm work with family members and things like that. It could also be a bit challenging because we're talking about the late 70s, early 80s, and there was a lot of racism, but other than that, it was just a perfect place to be raised.
How about, what was the worst memory? What was the best memory of growing up in the town?
I would say the worst memory for me was almost getting jumped in a fight. And I wasn't by myself. I had a couple friends, but it was just one of those things where when I look back, if it would have happened, somebody could have been seriously hurt, mainly me. So that was one of the worst times I had back there. But the best times I had were with all my cousins. I grew up with like 12 cousins, all boys around the same age. We were very competitive. We play outdoors. You didn't have Xbox, you didn't have Fortnite, you didn't have any of that stuff. If you wanted to have fun, you had to go outside and make fun, climbing trees. You could break your arm falling out of a tree, but at least you're breaking it doing something other than, clicking the buttons like all my kids do.
So you spent a lot of time climbing trees, and actually didn't start, your interest in basketball did not develop until relatively late for a basketball player. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I was coming up, my mother picked me and my brother and 3 of my cousins up and took us to a neighboring town for football. After the first day of conditioning, she was waiting for everybody to show up, and all their mom said they won't be going back. And so my brother and I were like, shoot, I guess we don't have to go. And she said, oh no, you're going to finish what you started. So I ended up playing football from the time I was like, I think 7, 8, Pop Warner football, all the way up until I was 13. I wasn't interested in basketball, even though I was a little taller than everybody. And it wasn't until, like my freshman year that I started to play basketball. Wasn't very good, and then left high school my freshman year at 5'10 and a half, came back, I was almost 6'4". And so I hit this growth spurt that was incredible, and it kind of made me have to choose basketball, at that point, because there was no football team. And, after growing and couldn't play my sophomore year because of growing pains, I started playing after that and was doing all right.
You were doing all right. So you were doing well enough to play 12 years in the NBA and against some of the all-time great NBA players and with some of the all-time great NBA coaches. When you look back at your basketball career, what do you remember the most?
As I look back over it, it starts with the draft, because I was supposed to be a second-round overseas player and work myself all the way up to the 8th pick in the draft. One of my worst memories, that'll always be my worst, was losing to the Lakers in Game 7 in LA in 2000 with 5 minutes to go. Everyone who was on that team, that'll haunt us until our days are up. I know it will me. And my best moment was when I was able to stand up to Karl Malone and not do it in a physical or verbal manner, but hold him to 8 points in 46 minutes. So that was my best.
For those who don't know, I'm a big Laker fan, and so I remember Game 7 in an entirely different way, entirely different viewpoint. Shaquille O'Neal, who we mentioned was born after you, had this iconic dunk game on a feed from Kobe Bryant, and I think you were on the receiving end. I think he snuck behind you. I think he pushed off.
I had two choices. I could either stay with my man and hope somebody else helped our point guard who had just gotten beat by Kobe, or I could step up and hope somebody stepped over and helped me out. But I stepped up. Nobody stepped over, and there's the iconic alley-oop dunk, and they run down the court, and you see us just like, what just happened? What just happened? But, I can at least say I got to that point. A lot of guys don't ever make it to the Western Conference Finals. We made it 2 years in a row. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it to the finals.
So then for those who don't know, Karl Malone, I think, is the NBA's third all-time leading scorer. So holding Karl Malone to 8 points over 46 minutes is pretty good.
I felt good after that game. But the thing that made me feel even better was when he came up to me and told me he thought I was a hell of a player. He's rooting for me to keep working hard, because that's my idol. That's who I pattern my game after.
And then Karl Malone, I think, has been a big supporter of the Brian Grant Foundation, even though you weren't necessarily all that close as players.
Well, after I was diagnosed, we had our first event, which we call Shake It Till We Make It. And I called him up. Actually, no, he called me up. So I was looking for his number, and somebody told him I was looking for him. And he called me up and asked what he could do to help. And I said, when we got in that scuffle, the next day I was interviewed, and they showed me everything you said. And they said, what do you have to say to Karl? And I said, Karl, he's one of my idols. I don't have anything bad to say about him. I'm just hoping that when this is all over, we can go fishing, because I hear he's outdoorsman. And so when we brought that item to the auction table, we ended up selling it for $107,000. Two groups paid $50,000, and then one of them donated it back, and somebody else paid $7,000. So it was $107,000 for one item, and that was, that's, they say the mailman delivers, he delivered it,
Outstanding. So we could go on and on about basketball. So you come out to Rochester, New York, we got a basketball court in the driveway, got 4 boys. We'll play. Maybe 5-on-1 might be a good competition, or I'd be delighted to come out to Portland and play with you.
You're going down low. My days down low are numbered. I sit out on the 3 and just launch.
So just 2 years after you finished playing the NBA, you were diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. I don't know. Do you know Rich Clifford, the astronaut?
No.
So Rich Clifford has Parkinson's disease. He was an astronaut. He went into the Space Shuttle Discovery, and he went on Space Shuttle Discovery 3 times, 3 Space Shuttle missions. His last mission he went on 2 years after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He went into space with Parkinson's disease and did a spacewalk while he had Parkinson's disease. Only the captain of his mission knew about it, his diagnosis. No one else did. So my question to you, if Rich Clifford walked in space with Parkinson's disease, were you playing the NBA with Parkinson's disease?
I think my last year in Phoenix was when I started noticing a big difference. You know, I couldn't jump off my left leg as well. It felt uncoordinated. I had little small tremors, but when you're in the NBA, you have all those kind of things happen to you anyway. So I didn't really think much of it until, you know, I saw the skin tremor in my wrist. And I went to the neurologist in Phoenix, and he said, you know, it's just nerves, don't worry about it. And so I moved back to Miami, went through 9 months of bad depression. And when I came out of it and finally got help, I said, you know, the place I want to be is Portland. So moved to Portland. And I think the defining moment for me after I was diagnosed was when we had an appearance at a Blazers game. It was myself, Chris Dudley, and Jerome Kersey, rest his soul. And I was so nervous because people didn't know that I had it. I hadn't announced it yet. And I'm in the tunnel, and I finally just went up to Jerome and said, Jerome, I got to tell you something. He said, what? I said, I have Parkinson's disease. And he looked at me and goes, get out of here. I said, I do. And he goes, gives me a hug and says, you're going to be all right. And I go, I don't want these people to know. He goes, B, nobody's going, I wouldn't have noticed it unless you told me. So I went out there, and if you watch the video of me waving to people and throwing balls, I just got this look on my face like, you know, I hope they don't know. But after that evening, you know, it was one of those things where I said, I need to come out because I can't keep making excuses for turning down interviews at ESPN and things like the things I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to explain the tremor. So I called Rick Bucher up. He came up, did the story, and that was it.
You wish you'd done it earlier?
I do, because at least then I would have still been able to go in and do tryouts, and then they could have figured out whether it was something they were going to be able to use or it's not good. So I blame myself for not coming out sooner, but no, I meet people all the time, especially in my community, that come up to me and tell me I have Parkinson's, but I'm not telling anybody yet. And I know how hard that is to keep it in and hold it in. I mean, that's almost worse than even having the disease. I mean, your mind starts playing tricks on you. People out there who need their jobs, where their job security may not be covered by them having Parkinson's. So some people have to hide it until we pass legislation that says, you know, you can't fire somebody because they have Parkinson's.
Well, because people like you and Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox and Alan Alda, all the people who are coming out with Parkinson's, you make it a lot easier for people who do have the disease, who are less well known, and you greatly reduce the stigma associated with the disease, and really help people better cope with the disease. Absolutely.
I mean, you can't really start coping with it until you realize that this is what you have. I mean, you kind of go through phases. Like, for the longest time, I thought, they don't know what they're talking about. I don't have Parkinson's. I don't have this stuff. And when I finally came to grips with it, I was able to step out more and join groups of men around my same age and have meetings with them and their spouses. So, you know, we always forget about the caregivers, man. And the caregivers have just as tough, if not a tougher job than we do. Because most of the time when we get the news, we're mad, upset, and complaining. Don't even really remember what the doctor said, but hopefully somebody's next to you writing it down, you know, or otherwise you're gonna miss out on a few things. But I'm very happy that I came out. I wish it would have been a little earlier, but who knows?
So for those who don't know, our Voices of Parkinson's series started off with an interview with Lonnie Ali, who talked a lot about the role of caregivers. If you missed it, we have it on our website at endingpd.org. Brian, have you looked back and figured out why you developed Parkinson's disease? Do you have any idea?
Well, like I said, I grew up in the country. I cut a lot of tobacco. And I can remember after a tobacco season going to school, and there was tobacco paste gum that was infused in your hand. So it took almost 9 months for that to grow out. So those chemicals involved in that, baling hay, digging potatoes, picking strawberries, whatever. If there was a paycheck in it, I was doing it as a kid, trying to earn money. That could be a possibility. you know, it's not genetic. And if it was, if I think back to my grandfather and his father, you know, when people had little things like this, they might call it a tick. He's got a tick. You know, it's not Parkinson's. Nobody really knew what Parkinson's was. So maybe there was somebody down the line that had it, but I'm not sure.
And were you exposed to pesticides when you were working with tobacco? Was that part of the process?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they spray it with pesticides and it gets into the tobacco. And I don't know if you know anything about cutting tobacco, but you've got 2 rows. You got a man in every other row, and you got sticks. You pick up a stick, put a spear on it, cut 3 stalks over here, slap them down, cut 3 stalks here, slap it down, get your spear and move on to the next stick. So when you're doing that, all that paste and gum is getting all over you. And there's definitely chemicals in it, but I don't want to say that was the reason. It could be maybe one of the reasons. Another reason could be that I ate my fair share of nasty catfish out of that big dirty river that we grew up on, you and I. But back then, I wasn't thinking about chemicals and, you know, pollution. I was just like, I just caught a 25-pound catfish. I can't wait to get it home and nugget it up and, you know, deep fry it.
For those who don't know, certain pesticides have been linked to Parkinson's disease. Certain pesticides are nerve toxins. They target the same parts of cells that are damaged in Parkinson's disease, and they dissolve in fat. And your fat is brainy substance. And we had Dr. Carly Tanner from UC San Francisco, who's done pioneering research that have linked numerous pesticides to Parkinson's. To the extent that we're creating this ourselves, we can stop using certain of these pesticides and prevent people from ever getting Parkinson's.
I was going to say, I know that, you know, when I spoke to the Ali's and got to know them, they definitely feel it was pesticides with him. I guess on his training site he had out in the country, they could remember people going through spraying and, you know, everybody kind of having to do this. And then Michael, I spoke to Michael once about it, and he says he knows he had been exposed to some type of pesticide when he was filming a movie on location somewhere. But he doesn't know if that's the reason he got Parkinson's, but, you know, who knows?
So we're going to send Brian a copy of the book. So this is our book, Ending Parkinson's Disease, a shameless plug. And in chapter 4, we detail the pesticides that are linked to Parkinson's disease. And in chapter 5, we detail the chemicals that are linked to Parkinson's disease. Chemicals that, for example, the astronaut Rich Clifford was likely exposed to. And again, we can prevent people from ever getting this disease if we stop using these pesticides and stop using these chemicals. What do you wish you knew about Parkinson's disease when you were first diagnosed?
What do I wish I knew about it, or what did I know?
Yeah, or either way.
I didn't know anything about it when I was diagnosed, other than that Ali had it and Michael J. Fox had it, and it was a disease that makes you shake. That's all I thought it was. But as you well know, it goes way deeper than that. It can affect your muscles in your throat. I've heard of a couple individuals who passed away from swallowing, and it just went down too slow, got lodged in. There are all kind of internal things that happen that people don't know about, that Parkinson's patients suffer from, bowel problems. You know, shoot, I have a little bit of neuropathy in my toes, and I've had 3 diabetes tests, and they're like, no, you don't have diabetes. So I'm assuming that that's from Parkinson's too. There's just a whole lot of things. Even if I did know all those things when I was diagnosed, the moment I was diagnosed, I would have forgot all about them. You know, because I'd have been just fixated on being told that I have Parkinson's. Yeah.
And so, did you also likely know depression's a common feature of Parkinson's? 40% of people with Parkinson's have depression, and it often occurs early in the disease course, and it's part of the disease and not necessarily a reaction to being diagnosed with the disease.
Yeah, I mean, the whole depression thing, definitely Parkinson's played a major part on it, but also my retiring. It was like the perfect storm. You know, I finished a 12-year career. You know, preseason had just started up. I went to a game in Miami, came home, And I remember talking to Vinny Del Negro, who told me, Brian, you gotta find something to do when you retire because there's not enough fishing, there's not enough golfing in the world. If you don't, you could possibly go through some depression. So when I started going through it, I just remembered him saying that and thinking, well, everybody goes through a little depression, but mine was so deep and dark that it couldn't just be retiring. And so it took me 9 months before I got up and went and got help. And a lot of that had to do with my pride too. Like, I didn't want to admit that I was depressed. And I'm sure I'm not the only prideful male or female out there who are going through depression that don't want people to know about it. You know, depression is no joke. I was one of those people who thought that if you were depressed, you were being weak-minded. I used to think that about people who were depressed until I was really depressed. And it's something that you can't just turn on and turn off. If you don't get help, medication, speak to somebody about it, you could be in there for the long haul. 9 months was 9 months too many for me.
So tens of millions of Americans have depression, a very common condition, one that we need to alleviate the stigma associated with it, like with Parkinson's disease. And it's a very treatable condition and people can get better.
Is the depression a treatable disease that can get better?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You just have to find the courage to make that move. Find the courage to get off that couch, eating Captain Crunch, watching the hunting channel all day. No, I'm not talking for an hour. I'm talking all day. Like, kids go to school, kids come home. He's on his third big bowl of Captain Crunch, and then now they're talking about hunting wild boar. So just have the courage to, take 2 steps towards somebody who's willing to help out. But you got to help yourself first.
So what gave you the courage to share your diagnosis with the world?
Well, because I was sharing it with my community, to a point. And it just really got to the point where I was tired of making up excuses or lying to people and saying I didn't really know. I just want to kind of come on out and, it's out there. Now let's talk about it. And I thought it was like going to be this big bad thing that I'll bring as Parkinson's, but it was, it really is what turned things around for me because I was able to share it with other people who were going through Parkinson's, and I was the student and they were the teacher. And now I'm the teacher, and there's several students out there that I'm probably making a difference in their life the same way these individuals made a difference in my life.
Your foundation is making a difference in a lot of people's lives. Can you tell us a little bit about the mission of your foundation?
Our foundation and the way we say it kind of changes from time to time, but we help those suffering from Parkinson's to live active and fulfilling lives. And the 2 things that we found, backed up by, what's the word I'm trying to say? I go blank sometime. By facts, is that through exercise and nutrition, you can have a positive response on your symptoms. It's not going to cure you, but it will allow you to live a better quality of life. And, through the pandemic, I got the chance to show myself that when I don't work out and I do sit around and I do eat a whole bag of Snickers candy bars, that my life's going to be a lot more difficult. I start to get more rigid. My meds don't work as well as they do. But when I'm on it, and I'm not talking like train like an NBA player. I'm talking, get up and walk a mile. Do what you can do. Just keep your body moving. When I keep my body moving, I feel the best. I think we're actually going to try to do something at the foundation to document this turnaround that I'm getting ready to have.
So numerous studies have demonstrated that exercise, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or walking or even tango dancing, are beneficial for people with Parkinson's disease. And there's you're going to jump in here on the tango?
No, I'm not tangoing, but I have found myself breakdancing, like popping and locking a lot. Because I figured that's got to help too.
I hear Shaquille O'Neal's a rapper. I think you could get maybe he could rap for Parkinson's disease.
I'll let him rap and I'll do the dancing. I'll be the sidekick dancer.
And then there's an increasingly large body of evidence, emerging body of evidence that suggests that vigorous exercise in your 40s and 50s can decrease your risk of developing Parkinson's by 10% or more a decade later.
I mean, we already know exercise is good for everybody, and food is medicine. I believe that. Food is really medicine. If you're eating the right things, monitoring it, sticking to a plan, that you will see some differences. Some people see more differences than others because we're all so different. But I would challenge anybody to go 8 weeks, 2 months, dedicated to something, their food, dedicated to their workout. I would challenge them to show me that it doesn't work, because I know it does.
And so there's been research, Brian's got it all down. There's research showing that a Mediterranean diet can be a benefit for people with the disease and even potentially prevent people from ever developing the disease in the first place. The Brian Grant Foundation has outstanding resources both on exercise and nutrition. Brian, you've had many chapters in your life, a basketball player, a tobacco farmer, a community leader, a person with Parkinson's disease, and a philanthropist. What's next for you?
Just trying to get through this COVID pandemic. It's been rough on a lot of people. It's definitely been rough on donors and nonprofits as well as profit, but nonprofits. The people that we count on are having rough times too because of the stock market and things like that. So Katrina, who is my executive director, who, if you don't already know, is one of the sharpest individuals I know, definitely the smartest, came up with a virtual gala, and we actually ended up raising over $120,000 on a virtual gala. And my thanks to her for putting it together, but we're all very grateful to all those who donated, and they didn't get a seat or get to be entertained, but they got to see some real people give real speeches about the disease.
So Katrina, we're going to speak to you in a momentarily. The Brian Grant Foundation is an outstanding organization making a huge difference in the lives of many people. And Brian Grant's journey in making the difference in the lives of people began far before he developed Parkinson's disease. Again, won a citizenship award from the NBA and has long been active in community service. Anything you want to say on that front?
The last part I didn't catch the very end.
Anything else you want to say about your commitment to community service, which dates back to dates back probably from your childhood?
Well, what I do want to say, there were people that helped me along the way to focus in, whether it was positive or negative. I think we're all going through some rough times. I know 2020 has been one of the roughest years of my life, and it all started when Kobe went down in a helicopter crash with Gianna. And then from there, my father passed away, and he passed away at a time where if I went to the funeral, then I'd be stuck on the highway away from my kids. So I didn't get a chance to spend those moments with them. Marty McNeil, beat writer in Sacramento, was a mentor to me, and he passed away. Enzo Simone, who was the guy that took us up and down Mount St. Helens, he passed away. It's just, there's been a lot of people passing away, and this isn't from just COVID. I mean, it's just from other things. But the thing I am learning is that it hurts. We have to mourn them, but then there's a part of it that makes me even stronger to want to push through on those days when I'm not feeling my best. To go out and be amongst crowds, which is sort of hard for me these days. But I need to keep putting myself out there, because I never know what I do will be the thing that helps somebody to get over something in life. And so I just got to keep pushing, and I keep pushing those around me to keep pushing.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for your resilience, for your leadership, and for all your service to the Parkinson's community. We're better all because of the work of you and Katrina Call and the Brian Grant Foundation.
Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed myself. If you ever need me to come back on, I'm with you.
So that was Brian from Monday. To help us learn more about the Brian Grant Foundation, we are now going to be joined by this talented executive director, Katrina Call. Katrina is a graduate of Portland State University and the University of California at Berkeley, where she completed her master's in public health. She has spent most of her career devoted to advocacy and communication, and previously worked for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. She joined the Brian Grant Foundation as its executive director in 2016. There, she's led multiple pioneering efforts, including educating clinicians on the importance of exercise in Parkinson's. Katrina, many thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Brian Grant just called you one of the smartest people he knows. How did he find you?
You know, I was working at the Michael J. Fox Foundation in 2008, 2009, when Brian was diagnosed and decided he wanted, first and foremost, to help support research. And so he called the Michael J. Fox Foundation to say, I'm going to throw an event in Portland on your behalf. And I was the one person at Michael J. Fox Foundation that, when they announced it was Brian Grant, said, hey, he's a trailblazer. So I was pretty excited to get a chance to meet him, although not necessarily under these circumstances. But I met him then, and I was from Portland, Oregon. So I kept in touch, and when I eventually moved back to Portland, Oregon, I gave Brian's foundation a call and just said, hey, just want to let you know, I'm back in Portland, Oregon. I know a lot about Parkinson's. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And I got a call from Brian right away, and he said, I really want to talk to you about what we can be doing to help people live with Parkinson's. And I thought that was an intriguing question. So I started working with him, and it's been a really great road. He's a great guy.
So we're going to take questions from people. We already have questions coming in. So if you have a question for Katrina, or a question about the Brian Grant Foundation, or even a question for Brian Grant, Katrina is more than happy to communicate those to Brian. Just put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them in a moment. You told us, he said that he wants to help people with Parkinson's live better. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Brian Grant Foundation?
Sure, we do programs around exercise and nutrition, as Brian mentioned, and we also do some community building, supportive things. Our whole goal is to take a look at what the evidence says are great ways to manage the symptoms. So we're trying to help people manage the symptoms so they can keep doing the things they like doing for as long as possible. And we try to make it fun and interactive. And of course, it's around exercise and nutrition. We're kind of like a how-to organization. What does the science say is helpful? How do you go about doing it? And so it's, and again, when Brian first started, I think it's a journey a lot of people go on. When you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, oftentimes your first thought is, I'm going to help find that cure. And then a few years later, Brian started to come around with, hey, but what else can I be doing? There's got to be some way for me to be able to manage the actual symptoms. And of course, because Brian was an athlete, used to training on a court, we were naturally drawn to exercise. And it turned out at that time, there were a lot of studies coming out to say, yeah, actually, exercise is a really good therapy. Close behind that started being some of the nutrition research as well. And so we really are trying to help provide information, resources, how to live with Parkinson's.
So we already have two comments. One from Mariette Robjan, who says, thank you, Brian Grant from the Netherlands. Parkinsonsport.nl is an official Brian Grant location. And for us, the Brian Grant Foundation is a great resource for our fitness and boxing program.
Oh, great. Great.
And then Myra Hirschhorn says, do you have Zoom programs going on now through this COVID period for folks all over the state to participate in?
Yes, we sure do. We have, we're doing expert Q&As every month. Actually, our next one is tomorrow with Dr. Sonia Mather, who I'm sure many people know. She is a woman living with Parkinson's and a retired physician. And we started a program early in the year called Kids of Parkinson's. And it's essentially a support network for people who have a parent with Parkinson's to try to help that unique community cope with the challenges they have as oftentimes caregivers. And so Sonia and her daughters are coming on tomorrow to talk about how you negotiate some of the conversations between your parents and Parkinson's. So that's happening tomorrow. We have them every month. If you go to briangrant.org, you'll see what we have going on there. We've also been doing some fun exercise initiatives. There are a lot out there though, so we're trying to find some fun ones. We have on our program advisory committee. So by the way, we do have a council of people with Parkinson's and their loved ones that support our work. And on that council is a man named Todd Vogt, who is a living with Parkinson's and is a champion rower. So he did a really fun rowing exercise session with us, and we do cooking demonstrations as well online. So again, briangrant.org is a great place to find out about all those different efforts.
Outstanding. So briangrant.org to learn more about online exercise and these upcoming webinars, including one tomorrow. We just heard Brian Grant talk about working on tobacco farms when he was young, about being exposed to pesticides, numerous pesticides. After the interview, I went and looked up what pesticides are used in tobacco farming. One called Manib has been linked to Parkinson's. I'm going to show you just one study on the results of Manib, if I can get my computer to agree here. Yeah, so let's see what we got. So this is one study from 2009, nothing new here. And this looked at individuals who were exposed to Manib or paraquat. And paraquat, as we've discussed on previous ones, is strongly linked to Parkinson's disease. It said persons aged less than 60 years old at the time of, let me back up. Exposure to both pesticides within 500 meters of the home increased the risk of Parkinson's by 75%. So exposure to Manib or paraquat increases your risk of Parkinson's by 75%, not 5%, not 20%, 75%. And people who were younger at the time of diagnosis were at much higher risk to be exposed to Manib or paraquat, an odds ratio of 2.27, which means twice as likely to be, if you're exposed, twice as likely to develop Parkinson's disease at a younger age. I know you guys spend a lot of time thinking about nutrition. Nutrition is obviously very tied in to pesticides.
Yeah.
A little bit about the work that you're doing there.
Well, first and foremost, I think as a public health professional, as you mentioned earlier, we believe that the best way for us to go about dealing with pesticides is to ban the use of pesticides that are linked to diseases, and to look for alternatives that you guys outline in the book so well. That it's not just about banning them, there are actually safer alternatives. So if we know those things, we should be pushing to take those chemicals off the market. So first and foremost, we are part of the UPAC, the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council, that's run through the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And we've been happy to be able to be a part of the efforts to help take pesticides out of the environment, and grateful to Ted Thompson and his team that run that. I'm also very excited about the new group, the PD Avengers. I just got my invitation to join them as well, picking up the book and trying to figure out how we can move the action steps forward. And so again, first and foremost, trying to help with the efforts to get the chemicals linked to Parkinson's out of the environment. We also promote, of course, organic foods because they happen to have less pesticide exposure, but often may not be available to everyone. So we also talk about some of the foods that are less likely to have heavy pesticide residues, and you can find those at the Environmental Working Group website. So we do talk to people about how they might be able to limit their exposure, though it's less clear what that means once you have Parkinson's. It's, if you are able to steer clear of foods with lots of pesticides, then we think that's a benefit to everyone.
And for those who didn't see, last week the New York Times was kind enough to write an article that talked about the link between Parkinson's disease and toxic chemicals, and they called out our book, which is very nice of them. A new book called The Increasing Prominence of Parkinson's and Man-Made Pandemic. This is written by one of the great health reporters for the New York Times, Jane Brody. And if you scroll to the end of it, you can see, I think there's over 75 comments from many people who share their experiences either working in Vietnam and getting exposed to DDT, or working on farms getting exposed to pesticides, or working in different industries getting exposed to chemicals that are linked to Parkinson's disease and may have contributed to their disease itself. We have some questions that are already coming in. AC Woolnow asked, why doesn't the PD community bring a class action suit against the EPA to eliminate paraquat, Katrina?
Well, I feel like that is a really good question, and I I think, again, it's great that we're starting these groups like the PD Avengers, and that there is the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council, which I actually think is very quiet about the successes they have, but is a successful advocacy group. I mean, I think I think a lot of it has to do with people rallying within the Parkinson's community, the people who live with the disease, the people who love people with the disease, to determine what it is you should be doing or want to be doing to ask people to take these chemicals off the market. There are efforts happening. So I would say try to inform yourself of them. I think the UPAC, I know on the Michael J. Fox Foundation website, you can go there and you can learn more about what the UPAC is doing and talk to them about it as well. But I would support the Parkinson's community to do whatever they think they need to do to help get some of these chemicals off the market.
And just to highlight a couple things, UPAC, they got over 100,000 signatures petitioning to remove paraquat and to have it banned. In the end of the book, we have these black pages that highlight where you can email the EPA administrator, Andrew Wheeler, or call him. And I've actually called him. I called his office myself, asking for paraquat to be banned. If 1 million Americans who have Parkinson's make their voices heard, we can ban paraquat. I can go on about pesticides.
Yeah.
Thinking about this disease ourselves, we can prevent people from ever getting the disease in the first place. Matthew Kroll says, I've been recently diagnosed and have been evaluating what I'm doing with my life. My name is Matt Kroll, and I'm the Vice President Executive Producer for Chronic Sports and Entertainment. Is there an opportunity to either work for or volunteer with the Brian Grant Foundation? I was a TV producer in Miami when Brian Grant was playing with the Miami Heat and Pat Riley. Katrina.
Yes, of course, there are opportunities. Please feel free to email us at info@briangrant.org and we will follow up with you. I will say COVID has sort of slowed us down a little bit in terms of like the things we have available for volunteer opportunities, unfortunately. But yeah, we want to hear from you. There are always ways to get involved with us. I mentioned earlier that we have the program advisory council that we have. A lot of time we are looking for people who want to join and tell us their experiences and help us guide our work, because as far as we're concerned, the programs that we create are based on what people tell us they need. And so the more voices, the better. So please do email us.
So info@briangrant.org. We just put that in the chat. So if you just click on the chat at the bottom of your Zoom, you can see that. You can also get the link to the New York Times article and also the link to the upcoming webinar that the Brian Grant Foundation is hosting. You're going to get a lot of feedback here. Katrina,
Yeah.
Jaya Chandran says, hi, I'm Christine, an Aussie in Peru. I'd like you to invite to the World Parkinson's Congress in Barcelona, June 22nd. Could you give us some basketball workshops and maybe this is an invitation to Brian Grant? That would help me and others practice their basketball skills in these tough times. My kids tried basketball in the summer and have natural skills. So trying to help them keep interested while we can't play for real or go to the gym. I've had Parkinson's disease since age 37. Be strong, we know it is tough.
Yeah, I think basketball is a great sport, and I am terrible at it. Having said that, of course, Brian and I would love to be a part of the WPC, and I think he would, learning from him and understanding what it takes to be an elite basketball player would be a fantastic opportunity. He doesn't play a lot of basketball anymore. I will tell you that. But having said that, he knows a lot about basketball. I, on the other hand, am maybe not as helpful. But I hope to see people at the WPC in 2022.
I would love to come and I'll play basketball.
There you go.
Also ask Abby, maybe copy some of these questions and answers and we can just pass them on to Katrina
Sure.
this call as well. Carol Volmer, thanks very much for always joining us. She asked, how long has Brian had Parkinson's disease?
Well, he was diagnosed in 2008. So he was 36 years old, diagnosed in 2008. He retired from the NBA in 2006. And as Brian mentioned in his interview, was pretty sure at least that last year, he was struggling with some of the symptoms. It may have been earlier than that, but definitely in that last year, he felt like he was struggling with some of the symptoms, which started off as some problems jumping off his left leg and some mild tremors, led to major depression the year after he was diagnosed. or before he was diagnosed, and then he finally got the diagnosis in 2008. So likely he was living with Parkinson's, you know, as early as 2005, though didn't get his diagnosis until 2008.
So just a couple of notes here. Brian Graham plays in the NBA with Parkinson's disease. Rich Clifford walks in space with Parkinson's disease. Janet Reno serves as Attorney General with Parkinson's disease. Pope John Paul II is Pope with Parkinson's disease. So there's lots of things that you can do with Parkinson's disease. Carol McClanahan asks, is there any evidence that a vegetarian diet is helpful for people with Parkinson's disease?
Well, I think that there is plenty of evidence that a Mediterranean diet is helpful for people with Parkinson's disease. And if you look at the staples of a Mediterranean diet, it's a lot of vegetables and a lot of plant-based foods with some meats. So whether or not it's necessarily vegetarian, it's certainly a diet that has a lot of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, fats from plant-based sources, nuts, seeds, all the sort of staples of a vegetarian diet are part of the Mediterranean diet. And so I think if you eat a vegetarian diet, you will, it's likely a very healthy diet at that. So whether or not the evidence bears out that a vegetarian diet is healthier for people with Parkinson's is unclear. But if you're eating a diet high in plants, which most vegetarians are doing, you will likely gain the benefits of that.
Amy Lindberg asks, does acupuncture help Parkinson's disease in any way?
You know, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. I haven't really followed the evidence. I know it's hard a lot of times with nutrition and some complementary and alternative therapies to really know whether or not they are helpful for people. I think if you want to give something a shot, you should. And if you find out it's good, it helps you, that's great. If those things are available to you. I think probably acupuncture could be helpful. You know, I think for things like tremors or what have you. I don't know that much about it though. But again, I'm of the mind that you might want to just give something a try. And if it seems to be helpful, then that's great. That's great news.
Bernadette Murrows asked about Ischlordane, I think is a pesticide. Is that linked to Parkinson's disease? I'll take this one for you, Katrina. Sure. So Ischlordane actually does, I just did a search right now, does belong to a class of pesticides that's been strongly linked to Parkinson's disease, where Dialdrin is commented on it. The list of pesticides is enormous. Not all pesticides are linked to it, but many pesticides by their design are nerve toxins. Many of them are fat soluble, that they dissolve in the fatty matter of the brain, and many target the parts of the cell that are damaged in Parkinson's disease, called the mitochondria. So thanks very much for that question. And again, before the book details it all in lay language, 10th grade reading level. Amy Lindberg asked, the incidence of Parkinson's disease is 1 in 15 per lifetime, relates to what demographic or average population? So that was, again, that study was actually done in physicians, male physicians, middle age. So people like me, middle-aged physicians who are men, have a 1 in 15 risk of developing Parkinson's disease. We think physicians might be a little bit higher risk, but what likely applies to middle-aged men in general. Risk of Parkinson's disease in women is a little bit less. Question for you from Pamela Quinn. Hi, Pamela. Many persons with Parkinson's disease are isolated during this COVID-19 time, particularly people who don't have access to computers or know how to use them. Since you're concerned about the quality of people's lives, would you be interested in offering tech help for people with Parkinson's?
You know what, actually, we would be interested. I can see that. I mean, we have noticed that we have on our online meetings that we get probably half the people connecting that have actually registered. And a lot of that is likely technical issues. And I do see that, and I do appreciate that can be difficult. And so, yeah, we will look into that. I appreciate her bringing that up.
And so Pamela's a dancer, organizes numerous in New York City, and I'm sure she'd be delighted to be connected.
Great.
Carol Vollmer both asked the same question. Are there certain foods that should be avoided, like cherries, I don't know, A1 steak sauce, And then dairy.
That is a hard question. So I would say, if you're thinking because cherries might be high in pesticides, again, I would send you over to the environmental working group. They and I think it's ewg.org, and they publish a list of the dirty dozen. So they take you through this fruits and vegetables that might be higher in pesticides and those that are lower in pesticides. So I'm wondering if maybe that was the comment about cherries, because berries tend to have very thin skins, and so it's a little bit easier for pesticides to really take hold in those fruits and vegetables. I think dairy is a difficult one, because there has been some evidence, mixed results, in terms of dairy's link to Parkinson's. We know a lot more about what maybe reduces your risk of getting Parkinson's and a lot less about what happens once you have Parkinson's. But I do think that it's always worth a shot to see if something makes you feel better. So the evidence might not be conclusive, but if you want to try to eliminate dairy from your diet, or you want to try to eliminate certain foods from your diet to see if they are better for you, then that's a great thing to do. Just make sure you're not eliminating a lot of foods, because it's really hard to tell which ones it is. But I do think that most of this evidence is going to be mixed, and it's going to be hard to know. And so part of it is about what you need, what you think you want to do to reduce your risk, and then it's about what makes you feel good when you eat something, or doesn't make you feel good when you eat something. And that's what I would kind of suggest to people.
And just, we discussed dairy in here in more detail. Some of these pesticides are consumed by the cows and then concentrated in their milk, and then could be drunk by humans. And there's this terrible story about high levels of pesticides being found in milk in Hawaii, and even finding that pesticide in people who died with Parkinson's disease. Albert Avery asked a question about deep brain stimulation. I'm going to refer you to an outstanding webinar that Michael Oken hosted on deep brain stimulation. It's at endingpd.org, and you just click on webcast, and there's a whole webcast on deep brain stimulation. Carol Vollmer asked, there was Parkinson's before pesticides, so there are obviously other causes. Besides genetics, what are some of the other possible causes? You want to start, Katrina, and then I'll chime in?
Well, sure. I mean, I think, we know that it was sort of characterized 200 years ago. So I think that pesticides is one chemical that might be linked, but there's likely been quite a few. There's probably other things, air pollution, other things that have been linked to Parkinson's as well. So just because pesticides might be relatively new along the Parkinson's spectrum, there were certainly chemical exposures prior to pesticides. The book also outlines other things too, like head trauma. And that head trauma might be accounting for some of the Parkinson's, and then of course, like she said, genetics. But I think that likely there's a range of different chemical exposures that have been with us for some time that are leading to some of the neurological conditions we're seeing.
That's a better answer than I could have given. It says the cherry thing was not an issue about organic. It's because cherry specifically decreased uric acid. You want to comment on that as well?
I actually don't know that much about cherries decreasing uric acid and whether that's a problem. I certainly hope not. I love cherries, and I think they're filled with antioxidants and a number of other great nutrients in terms of supporting other parts of important processes that are happening in the body. But I would have to look at that more closely.
So there's some evidence that high levels of uric acid may be preventive in terms of developing Parkinson's disease. Our colleague, Dr. Michael Schwarzschild, did a study evaluating a drug that increased uric acid, but unfortunately did not have benefit for people with the disease. But there's still an active area of research. Kenneth Scholl says, hi, Katrina. Ken Scholl, your physical therapist with Parkinson's disease, who met you in Miami 2 years ago.
Yeah, hi, Ken.
You're providing a tremendous service to those of us with Parkinson's disease. Has anyone done an extensive cross-cultural study to see if there are countries that have minimal or no incidence of Parkinson's disease, and possibly factors either genetic or environmental?
You know, I haven't really looked into it. The book does go into some interesting cases around the world. So one was that the high increase that's happening in developing countries like China, seeing like, I think it was 116% increase as they become more using more of the pesticides and what have you. The book also talks a little bit about, I think it's the Netherlands, right, which has banned some of these pesticides, right, and is now seeing decreased levels of Parkinson's disease. So I think that there have been bits and pieces in different countries, but I don't know that there's been a bigger meta-analysis across numerous countries to look at that.
And so just in brief, I'll just start. I first say, if you want to learn more about a lot of answers to these questions are in our book. Our book is available right now on Amazon. Amazon still has it discounted at $17.89. We have nothing to do with the pricing. All proceeds of the book are going, the author's proceeds are going to efforts to end Parkinson's disease. We're dedicating our funds to investigate environmental causes of disease so we can give you better answers to many of these questions. If you have read the book, we would love you to write a review of it. You can just click here on ratings, and you can, all you need to do is to do a rating. You don't need to have bought the book on Amazon. You can just click on write a customer review, and it takes all of 2 minutes to write one. You can say, headline, Brian Grant is great. And then you can click submit. We love Katrina, and you're good to go. If cost is a burden, all you have to do is email us at info@endingpd.org, info@endingpd.org. We'll send you a free copy. Just give us your mailing address, and we'd be delighted to do so. Katrina, I'm going to give you the last word here. What should people know about Parkinson's disease, and how can we end it?
I think that the book outlines how we can end it. I really do think it takes a concerted effort of people living with Parkinson's and the Parkinson's community to come forward and say, we believe some of these exposures, some of these chemicals, some of these other things that are happening are leading to Parkinson's disease, and we want that to be stopped. And I think we're seeing right now around the world that people are standing up and starting to speak and voice what they need to make their communities safe. I'd also say that I really appreciate the chance to work with this community, and the questions that have come up on this webinar and this webcast have been incredible. And I think that's what we need too, as people, professionals in the Parkinson's communities, to hear your questions and to be asked tough questions so that we make sure that we're constantly working toward the needs of the people that we serve. But I've really appreciated the chance to be here. And if you haven't read the book, I loved reading the book. And so I would say to everyone, read the book. It's a great roadmap to what we can be doing.
So read the book, review the book, make voices heard. Katrina, many thanks to you and to Brian,
thank you.
Brian Grant Foundation for all of your efforts and service to the Parkinson's community. If you want to learn more, info@briangrant.org. Additional links in the chat. Our next Ending PD webcast is on Friday, August 7th at 12 noon Eastern, when Dr. Michael Oken will be speaking with Bob and Pam Tebow. If the name Tebow sounds familiar, because it is, because these are the parents of the football and baseball player Tim Tebow. So Friday, August 7th, 12 noon Eastern, Dr. Michael Oken speaking with Bob and Pam Tebow about their experiences with Parkinson's disease. Until then, thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian Grant. And thank you all for joining us. Let's end Parkinson's together.
Yeah, thank you.